You know all about the hero's journey. You may even have answered your own call to adventure. But do you know what comes next? Complete with its own life-changing lie versus truth, this is the Luminary's story. Have you lived this archetypal journey in your lifetime? And if so, did you emerge at the other end as a powerful and empowering ruler, or were you defeated by one of the archetype's destructive antagonists? My name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the fantasy mental health game Betwixt, which is where you'll find all of my best and most creative tools for self-awareness building and self-compassion. And this series of videos is devoted to the, in my opinion, fascinating world of archetypal character arcs, as inspired by K.M. Weiland's book, Writing Archetypal Character Arcs. The Luminary is my gender-neutral name because it applies to all of us, not just those who identify as women, for the more traditional queen or mother archetype, which is the third in a series of 6 archetypal journeys that map onto the archetypal human life. Here are the archetypes, renamed and in the order they would take place over the course of this life story. The Tenderfoot and Warrior represent the traditionally feminine and masculine journeys taken in the first part of life. The Luminary and Sovereign cover the middle period, and the Seer and Mage take care of old age. That said, real life doesn't tend to play out as linearly as this mythic version, and that means that we can find ourselves on versions of these journeys multiple times and in multiple stages of life. As what Weiland refers to as positive change story arcs, these are journeys of transformation, and as such, we see the character transform from one archetype to the next. The Luminary's journey, therefore, that we're exploring today is not about becoming the Luminary, but about arcing out of Luminary and into the archetype at the apex of personal power, the Sovereign. Along the way, there will of course be some friction in the form of 2 archetypal antagonists or baddies, and the threat of 2 dark and destructive shadow archetypes that could rise up and take hold. And finally, every journey involves the transition from a lie to a truth. We start out believing something unhelpful, negative, or disempowering about how the world works, and the real pot of gold at the end of the journey for us is to have traded in that lie for an empowering, contrasting truth. Above all else, the lie versus truth is the acid test. This is how we really know if we've made it. And because it can be so transformative, I would like to challenge you to see if you can work out what the Luminary's lie and truth might be as I explain the story. I'll reveal the 2 sentences at the end of the video. The Luminary's journey is a battle that takes place in the symbolic setting of the kingdom. And seeing as the Luminary picks up where the warrior left off, that is, integrated comfortably into the community as a mature adult, this will be someone who has already followed their own call to adventure and contributed in some meaningful way. They may be a parent, a boss, a manager, or just somebody whose friends look to for advice and direction, but in one way or another, the Luminary will hold a position of authority over other people. So, while the challenges of the first act were all about the relationship with self and developing ego strength, this second act, that is the Luminary and Sovereign, instead is focused on the relationship we have with others. A graduation from a focus on personal responsibility to one on social and relational responsibility. Think George in It's a Wonderful Life, Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter in The Order of the Phoenix, and Buffy heading up the Scooby Gang in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, unlike the Tenderfoot and Warrior, who were both motivated to take their respective journeys out of a sense of deep need and lack in their lives, the Luminary doesn't really want to level up. They've done the work to claim their identity. They've had life's big adventure, or so it seems to them at least. And as a result, they feel accomplished, purposeful, and they take joy and pride from being this connected and compassionate leader or parent or whatever it is that they are. In other words, they are not only in the thrall of the lie part of the Luminary's lie versus truth, they actually love living this lie. And they may take pride in doing so. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything. I haven't told you what the lie is yet, but I will in a bit. This is all just a clue. Anyway, alas, the longer the Luminary stays in this mode, the clearer it will become that those they love need more if they are to rise to the various challenges of their own empowering journeys. That is to say that, while the warrior unlocked connection on their journey, learning that love creates meaning, the Luminary must reluctantly realize that love, on its own, is not enough. There must also be order, and the much harder to assert boundaries of strong and empowering leadership. And therein lies the Luminary's main challenge. It's easy to lose yourself in a world you created for yourself, where you feel bolstered by the love of adoring dependents or students or staff or whatever that love you back. But this cannot last. The Luminary must now mature away from their own need and desire for loving connection and into the more detached role of leader, if they're going to pass this test. Most of us will recognise this as the challenge any parent faces to let their children grow up. to stop trying to coddle or control, and to just trust instead. But it's the same for any leader, really any adult. We have to learn to stop micromanaging and spoon-feeding the younger generation, and instead allow them to make their own mistakes and take their own paths and be their own people. How inconvenient and annoying. But if we don't do this, we'll raise a horde of naïfs and cowards who cannot protect themselves, let alone those that they need to eventually lead. And this brings us to the first of the Luminary's archetypal antagonists, the invader. With no inner yearning at all to get them moving, the Luminary absolutely needs an enemy to spur them into action. And this enemy must threaten the life that they've created for themselves as well as the safety of those around them. This is to say that when the invader threatens, it is not ego that motivates the Luminary to answer their call to action, but a selfless need to protect those they love. And similarly, the Luminary's call is not a call to quest alone into battle and defeat the enemy single-handedly as they've done on their Warriors arc. The Luminary will likely want to just sort the problem out on their own as they're used to, but instead they're going to have to learn to let others fight alongside them, because the Luminary's call is a call to true leadership. Which brings us to the second and probably most important of the Luminary's antagonists, the empty throne. Even though the Luminary may be highly reluctant to step up as leader, they simply must, because there is a vacancy at the top and no one else to fill it. So, in the end, they can either cling to their beloved role of doting, connected parent/boss/leader and endanger those they love, or they can lay to rest the softer version of their current self and rise up to fill the empty throne and lead the battle against the invader. Should they heed the call, this symbolic death, painful as it may be, is the only thing that can make way for the character's rebirth as the more powerful, more socially responsible sovereign. And this might feel like a loss to the Luminary as it happens, but it is in fact an evolution of love. As Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes in this awesome quote, "Love, in its fullest form, is a series of deaths and rebirths, all in the same relationship." At the end of the day, to endure these mini-deaths is to allow love. To resist them is to crush it, to halt it. In other words, to be the antagonist to the person you love. Fun fact, mini-death in French, le petit mort, means orgasm, really hammering home, for want of a better term, the symbolic connection between death and love. But I digress. In sum, the Luminary's journey is a tough one, filled with sacrifice and grief, but ultimately that leads to a greater connection, a better life for all involved, and a renewed sense of meaning for the Luminary too. But, as with all these journeys, in both story and in real life, there is no guarantee that the character, or you, or I, will take the opportunity to complete this arc whenever it's presented. And if we don't, well then we'll run the risk of awakening not the sovereign within, but one of the Luminary's shadow archetypes, the figurehead or the vampire. We'll explore these dark sides in the next video, but I can tell you now that the one thing these two characters have in common is that they have not made the transition from the Luminary's lie to truth, which is one of control versus leadership. Let's see if your guess is anywhere near the mark. The lie goes something like this: only my loving control can protect those I love. And the truth that's claimed by a successful Luminary arc sounds like this: only wise leadership and trust in those I love can protect them and allow them to grow. Going with your very first gut answer, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being completely false and 10 being entirely true, how would you score that second statement, the Luminary's empowering truth? In other words, have you taken this journey somewhere in your real life? Have you realized your potential to lead with empowering trust and order as opposed to disempowering control or coddling? If not, are there situations in your life right now as a parent or boss or other leader where you think you might need to make this transition? And if so, what would this look like for you? Are you ready to shed the old skin, to let those you love or lead grow up and be their own people completely? If you're getting a resounding no to these questions, then first of all, please don't worry. Of course, it's absolutely okay to take these journeys in your own time, or even not to take them. After all, not everyone, in fact very few of us, will live anything close to the archetypal human life. But if you're on this journey and not up for this particular transition to sovereign, then you do need to keep an eye out for the Luminary's shadow archetypes, which we'll cover in the next video. In the meantime, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and I really hope this helps. If you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth and wellness, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.